The press conference confrontation between Donald Trump and Jim Acosta began with CNN's White House correspondent debating the president over the migrant caravan and soon led to an extraordinary clash.
That this caravan was an invasion. As you know, Mr. President,
I consider it to be an invasion.
As you know, Mr. President, the caravan was not an invasion. Mr. President, if I may ask
Peter,
one other question, are you worried?
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President, I was
enough.
going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President.
That's enough. I'll tell you what, CNN should be ashamed of itself having you working for them. You are a rude, terrible person. You shouldn't be working for CNN. Go ahead.
I think that's unfair.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible.
Joining us now from Houston, Kristin Tate, a columnist for The Hill and author of How Do I Tax Thee? And in New York, Jessica Tarlov, senior editor at Bustle and a Fox News contributor. We'll get to the suspension in a second, but Kristin, did Jim Acosta, who's known for grandstanding and for kind of debating and challenging President Trump, go too far?
Yeah, this was just the latest example of Acosta derailing these briefings and making them into a circus. His goal was to debate Donald Trump and put the attention back on himself. His intent was not to seek information. During the briefing, he said, quote, "As you know, Mr. President, this caravan is not an invasion. This is not a question. It's a statement." Acosta specifically put himself in a contrarian position to sort of provoke a response from President Trump.
Right.
These briefings are supposed to provide information to the public. Acosta's wasting valuable time, and he's rude.
All right, so let me set this up for you, Jessica, by playing Jim Acosta's response when he was asked about this afterwards on, of course, CNN.
He just didn't like hearing that question. He didn't like being challenged on that point, and he certainly doesn't like being called out for his falsehoods.
So Acosta and CNN say, hey, he was just doing his job as a reporter, and whatever you thought of the question, you know, where I had a problem, a serious problem, is when he just kept talking and would not give up the mic. It's not how it works at White House news conferences.
Well, he definitely wasn't following the rules. The president does get to decide when you move on. There are a number of reporters, though, who say, oh, I have a follow-up, or they start out by saying, I have 3 questions, Mr. President,
right.
And
well,
they don't get that kind of treatment.
He asked about 3
I
before.
understand that. Frankly, I think both of them were ill-behaved in this exchange. I felt bad for the intern who was put in an uncomfortable position for the president. Your boss is saying, take the mic. And Acosta is saying politely, no, excuse me, ma'am, I'm not done here. But to Kristin's point about that not being a question, it absolutely was a question since we saw such a radical drop-off in discussion of this invasion caravan after the election. I mean, there have only been a couple of segments on it where it was around-the-clock cable news because the president wanted to fearmonger his base into voting.
Okay,
so I do think it was a question.
All right. Well, there have been other things going on, in fairness, including the midterm elections and including a mass shooting.
The story, and now we're not that scared.
All right. All right. So,
and we had a mass shooting, too. We had the Pittsburgh synagogue. So,
Kristin, did the White House go too far in suspending Jim Acosta's credentials? Because that shifts the spotlight to whether the Trump team overreacted. And I've said, I think by doing that, the White House kind of made Jim Acosta into a journalistic martyr, and most of the news business standing behind him.
Acosta should have lost his press pass a long time ago. This has been going on for way too long. He's using these briefings to make himself famous and divert attention away from the valuable information that the public wants onto confrontations. It is not fair. He should have been gone a long time ago.
Let me jump in and ask you, look, CNN says that Trump's attacks on the press, and this includes not just the attacks on Jim Acosta, are dangerous and un-American. It's a really strong word. Doesn't that feed the perception that this is getting partisan between a news organization and the president?
Well, it's definitely part.
Kristin.
Sorry.
It has gotten partisan, and that's really unfortunate. But Trump has been put in the position where he can either respond to these journalists like Acosta who are out of control or just do nothing and let it happen. So at some point, the White House needs to take action.
All right. And Jessica, what about the White House trying to make this about that brief interaction we saw between Jim Acosta and this young White House intern who's trying to get the mic and saying, well, he laid hands on her, which Acosta denies. Was that really what this suspension was about?
No, and also we know that they doctored the video. You addressed this earlier in the week. Kellyanne Conway is with Chris Wallace today.
I got to clarify.
And saying, oh, this is...
Okay, I got to clarify. They, the White House, didn't doctor any videos. Sarah Huckabee
Alex
Sanders
Jones did.
Put out
Actually, it came off InfoWars.
From InfoWars. Also, it was misleadingly edited. And while we're talking, let me just put up a close-up about, you know, did he actually chop at her arm or not? I think looking at the unedited video, it's pretty clear that it was the contact was incidental. Go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, the contact was absolutely incidental, and you could tell most people who are karate chopping someone are not at the same time saying, excuse me, please, ma'am, if you could give me a second, I'm not done here. That's not how it's done. They took this, Sarah Huckabee Sanders took this off of InfoWars, which is a propaganda site that has been banned by a number of platforms, including Facebook and Twitter and Apple. This, by the way, to your credentialed journalist point, the president is more comfortable with journalists from InfoWars than he is from CNN. And for you to say that Jim Acosta should have lost his press pass when he works for CNN, when you look at the kind of people that this administration is fine with, is ridiculous.
Let me jump in here because I want to get to the midterms briefly. Here's the president characterizing a night on which the Democrats won the House. Go.
I think it was a great victory. I'll be honest. I think it was a great victory. And actually, some of the news this morning was that it was, in fact, a great victory.
Kristin, all politicians spin election results, and yes, the Republicans held the Senate, picked up a couple of seats, but how does Trump describe this as an almost total victory for Republicans when we no longer have one-party government here in Washington?
Well, in many ways, it was a good week for the GOP. The GOP actually picked up seats in the Senate, and the losses in the House were not as bad as they were expected to be. Remember, in 1994, under Bill Clinton, Democrats lost 52 House seats. In 2010, under Obama, they lost 63. I don't remember the media calling that a big red wave at the time when it happened.
No,
but you're
it was
absolutely
described
right
as an explosion.
Shellacking.
Absolutely, yeah. Barack Obama called it shellacking. George W. Bush called it a thumping when he lost both houses of Congress in 2006. Jesse, I've got about half a minute. I mean, I get the president's argument that he thinks he can work with Nancy Pelosi and be easier. But, you know, the Democrats picked up at least 30 House seats, could be 35.
It's at 38, 39 now. If you look, I mean, California.
Not as big as some previous waves,
there.
but the point is, there's now an opposition party in control of one chamber.
It was definitely a blue wave. If you look at what Amy Walter is saying, Nate Silver, et cetera, they're calling this unequivocally a blue wave. State legislature, 7 governor seats. Yes, Mike Braun won, and we lost Claire McCaskill's seat. We'll see what happens in Arizona and Florida. I feel like Sinema will win, and Gillum and Nelson will not in Florida. But it definitely was a good night for Democrats. This is what politicians do, and they spin. But he could, you know, just recognize the fact that he is now going to have to deal with a strong Democrat majority.
He
did recognize. He actually praised Nancy Pelosi.
I've got to go. Yeah, he praised Nancy Pelosi. It was interesting. Kristin
Nancy
Tate,
Pelosi did a pretty good job getting us through this, I would say.
Jessica Tarloff, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Howie.
Thanks, Howie.